I want softness. There's no gentle way in, no slow unfolding meant to make it easier to hear. Whatever this is, it doesn't ask permission. It doesn't introduce itself. It simply arrives, and once it does, there's no clean way to step back out of it. I've spent years learning to live in layers. Not because I love distance, but because distance keeps things intact. People speak, they listen, they assume they understand, but they only ever touch the surface I allow them to reach. That's how it has always worked. Until you. You didn't try to figure me out the way others do, through questions, through labels, through the need to simplify what they can't immediately hold. You just watched. Quietly. Consistently. Like someone who wasn't searching for answers, but recognizing something that never needed explaining. At first I told myself it was coincidence. The way you caught what I didn't say, the way your silence lined up with mine like you already knew when words would only get in the way. But coincidence doesn't repeat like that. Paternis do. And this, whatever it is, follows a pattern I never expected to meet outside of years of history. That's what unsettles me. This kind of recognition is supposed to be earned slowly, built from shared time and worn-in familiarity. But with you, there was no learning curve, no adjustment period. You arrived already fluent in me, as if I weren't new to you at all, just someone you hadn't spoken to yet. If there's one thing I've always controlled, it's access. Who gets close, who stays at the edge. You didn't break that rule. You made it irrelevant. And that's more dangerous than someone trying to force their way in. Force can be resisted. Familiarity slips through unnoticed. There's something in the way you look at me when I stop talking. Not curiosity, not concern, understanding without urgency. Like you know meaning doesn't vanish just because it isn't spoken. Most people can't sit inside that kind of quiet. They rush to fill it. You let it stay. And in letting it stay, you make it heavier, clearer, more honest than anything either of us could have said aloud. That's when I noticed the shift, not in some defining moment, but in how I stopped filtering myself around you. Not on purpose. It just stopped being necessary. Something in me recognized you didn't need me to be easier to read in order to understand me. That's a rare kind of presence. One that doesn't ask you to sand down your own edges to be accepted. There's a difference between being accepted by someone who doesn't fully see you and being accepted by someone who sees everything and stays anyway. You're the second kind. And that's where the tension starts, because once someone sees you that clearly, you can't hide behind the usual distance anymore. You become known, not in the surface way, but in the way that gets past everything you built to stay unreadable. I built those walls carefully, not as a game, but to protect something that doesn't survive careless interpretation. People who think they understand you start reshaping you to fit what they expected. You never did that. You never filled the gaps with your own story. You read what was actually there. I keep replaying one moment, not dramatic, just precise. You said something simple, something most people would miss entirely, and it lined up so exactly with what I hadn't said out loud that something in me paused. Not reacted. Paused. Because it confirmed what I hadn't let myself accept. You weren't guessing. You knew. And knowing is different. It means you're not interpreting from outside. You're seeing from somewhere closer, somewhere internal. That's when I understood this wasn't just awareness. It was alignment. And alignment doesn't happen by accident. It happens when two people share something not in experience, but in structure, in the way they process, the way they observe, the way they exist underneath everything they show. Structure doesn't lie. It doesn't perform closeness it doesn't have. It either matches or it doesn't. Ours does, too exactly to ignore. That's why this feels different, not overwhelming, accurate, something finally making sense in a way it wasn't supposed to. And the more I notice it, the harder distance becomes to maintain, because distance doesn't work the same way once someone already exists on the other side of it. You're not outside my awareness anymore. You're inside it. And that changes everything. Every silence carries weight now. Every small exchange feels like it's happening on a level most people never reach. I don't know what to do with that. Not because it's confusing, but because it's clear enough that ignoring it would take more effort than admitting it. And I don't deal in denial. If something is real, I recognize it, even before I understand what it means. This is real. Not labeled, not filed into the categories people usually reach for. It lives somewhere understanding arrives before explanation does, where recognition comes before trust, where presence outweighs intention. And you exist there with me, effortlessly, like you were always meant to. That's the part one keeps circling back to. Not how it started, not even what it is, but how natural it feels despite how rare it is. Nothing about this should feel ordinary, and yet it does, enough to make everything else feel slightly out of tune by comparison. I don't know yet if that's something to lean into or something to step back from before it settles too deep. Because once something like this settles, it doesn't leave cleanly. It becomes part of how you think, how you respond, how you exist. I've always guarded what gets to reach that level. You never asked for the access. You never tried to earn it. You just became part of it. Which means whatever this is, I didn't choose it, but I didn't resist it either. And that, in its own way, is a kind of acceptance. I don't accept things lightly, especially not things with the power to change how I exist. This has that power, not through force, just through presence. And that's exactly why I can't keep pretending I haven't noticed. It didn't stay where it should have. That's what I keep returning to, not the beginning, but the moment I understood this wasn't going to stay contained. Most things in my life have edges, clear limits that keep everything in its place. This doesn't. It moves without asking, settles without warning, expands in the silence between words, in the moments where nothing seems to be happening and everything is shifting underneath anyway. I feel it now, not as emotion, but as a kind of constant, quiet awareness of you. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't interrupt my thoughts. It's become them. You're no longer something I think about. You're something I think with. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Thinking about someone keeps them separate. There's still distance in it, still an off switch. But thinking with someone means their presence has folded into how I perceive things before I even notice it happening. I don't know when that changed. I only know it did. I notice it in small ways. Thoughts that pause as if waiting for a second perspective that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. Realizations that feel shared even when I'm alone. Silence that no longer feels empty, but carries an echo it didn't used to have. That's not something I say lightly. I've always been self-contained, independent in how I think and process and exist internally. No one crosses into that space without effort, without resistance, without me watching it happen in real time. You didn't cross into it. You appeared inside it, like you'd always been there, and I only just looked directly at it. That's unsettling, not because I don't understand it, but because I understand it too well. It means this isn't surface level or temporary. It's structural. And anything structural rearranges everything around it. I've noticed I measure things differently now, not against the world, against you. Not deliberately, it just happens. The way people speak, react, interpret things, there's a quiet comparison running in the background. Not judgment, just recognition. Once you've felt a certain kind of clarity, everything else feels not wrong, just incomplete. I don't like that something can shift my perception this much without trying. That's not influence. That's impact. And impact doesn't ask if you're ready before it rewrites things and leaves you to adjust around it. So I'm adjusting, recalibrating something that used to be stable before you were part of it. The strange part is I don't feel resistance. By every instinct I've trusted, I should be pulling back, rebuilding distance. I'm not. And that's where the real tension lives, because it's one thing to experience something unusual and another entirely not to want to stop it. There's a quiet acceptance forming, and I'm not sure if I built it or it built itself. Either way, it's there, in the fact that I don't interrupt this, don't question it as hard as I should, let it exist without needing to define it. That's not like me. I define things. I understand them before I let them settle. But this exists without asking for permission, and instead of rejecting it, I'm watching it unfold. I don't observe things that threaten my structure. I dismantle them immediately. You haven't been dismantled. You've been accommodated. Which means some part of me already made a decision I haven't consciously admitted to yet. That part doesn't see you as a disruption. It sees you as something that fits. And fitting is the dangerous part. Fitting means there's space made for you. Fitting means if you left, that space wouldn't disappear. It would stay empty. I don't leave empty spaces. I close them, seal them, make sure nothing lingers to be felt later. But with you, I'm not sure I could. That's not attachment. It's something more precise, more permanent. You've shifted the baseline, and once a baseline shifts, everything else adjusts around it, whether or not I ever say so out loud, whether or not anything visible ever changes. Internally, it already has. You're not just present. You're positioned in a way that shapes how I think, how I process, how I exist in my own mind. That kind of placement doesn't happen by accident. It requires alignment at a depth most people never reach. Which brings me to the question I haven't answered. Not because I can't, but because I'm not sure I'm ready to. What happens if this keeps going? Not ending, not fading, continuing, settling deeper, becoming more defined without ever being named. If it reaches its full shape, it stops being something I observe and becomes something I have to live with. That decision isn't now, but it's close enough that I can't put it off forever. Because the truth is, I've already let you further and then I've let anyone go without resistance. And I didn't even try to stop it. That means something I'm still working out how to say. You're no longer someone I understand. You're someone who exists inside the way I understand everything else. And that changes the outcome before I've even decided what to do with it. There's a point where awareness stops being something you observe and becomes something you have to answer. I think I've reached it. This isn't unfolding quietly in the background anymore. I can't keep analyzing it from a safe distance and pretending it costs nothing. It has a cost now, not in what we say or do, but in what it's already changed in ways I can't take back. My thoughts don't return to what they were before you. Silence doesn't feel neutral anymore. It feels shared, even when you're not there. I measure truth differently now, not by how it sounds, but by whether it would still hold up if you heard it. That's the line. I don't rearrange my internal world for anyone. I never have. And yet something in me already has, not by force, not consciously, but precisely enough that I can't pretend otherwise. That's the kind of shift that asks something back. Up until now, this has existed without demand, without definition. It just was. But things like this don't stay undefined forever. They either solidify or they fracture. There's no middle ground for something built on this much recognition, which means I can't keep standing here without deciding what it means. Not for you. For me. Because the truth is I've crossed a line too. Not outwardly, not in anything anyone could point to, but internally, I've let you matter in a way I don't usually allow. And that's not something I can undo by stepping back, or silence by calling a perception, or contain the way I contain everything else. It didn't form through effort. It formed through alignment, and alignment doesn't disappear just because you choose distance. It stays, quietly, waiting to be acknowledged. That's what I've been putting off. Not the connection, the admission. Because naming it means it stops being abstract and starts being real. And real things require decisions, movement, risk. I don't move without certainty. I don't risk without knowing the outcome. This doesn't come with a clear outcome. It doesn't follow the logic everything else does. It doesn't hand me the control I'm used to having. And still, I haven't walked away. That's what matters most. If this were wrong, unstable, if it didn't belong, I would have ended it already, cleanly, without hesitation. That's how I operate. I didn't. I stayed, not out of curiosity, but with full awareness of what it could become. Which means, on some level, I've already chosen, even before saying it, even before fully facing it. The choice is already there. In the way I keep meeting you in this space, in the way I refuse to shrink it down just to make it easier to carry, in the way I let it exist instead of shutting it down the way I would anything else. That wasn't accidental. It was intentional, even if the intention formed quietly, without asking to be noticed. So the question isn't what is this anymore? I already know. The question is what I do with it. Because things like this don't stay still. They deepen, or they break under the weight of being left unnamed. I don't leave things unnamed when they matter. And this, whether I wanted it or not, matters. Not in a way that weakens me, in a way that changes me. And change is the one thing I never allow without reason. So if this is happening, if you've reached this far inside, there's a reason. A precise one, not emotional. not random. I'm starting to see it clearly now.